Hello. 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2. Paki-roll off 150 hertz. Hello, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Siguro mga 3 dB, 10K. 1, 2, 1, 2. isa kong kliyente, ganun po. Binili yung the only one in the Philippines. Sinabi niya, magkano yan? Binili. Anyway. Okay, so first, the three elements are, in other words, ang sinasabi ko is that you cannot remove one from the other. Dapat magkakasama sila palagi. If you want a good sounding space or room. Okay? All right. So first is, there has to be proper acoustic control of the space. Dapat tama. We'll discuss that one by one. Number two is a well thought of and designed sound reinforcement system. PA, in other words. In other words, amplification. In other words, audio. No? The difference between sound and audio is that when it's amplified, it is audio. Sound is natural. You get it? Yun ang difference between the two. Pag dumaan na ng amplifier, dumaan na ng speakers, that becomes audio. Okay? And then three, which is the most important thing, is knowledgeable and capable audio operators. Yan ang one of the most important things. Because you can have the two other stuff in there, but you have somebody who does not really understand what he's doing. Eh wala. Walang mangyayari. Okay? All right. So, first thing that we have to understand is that all these things are not just hula-hula. So, ang caveat emptor natin, especially for room acoustics, is that you design a room which is not guesswork. Hindi, tapal tayo rito, tapal tayo doon, dapat maglagay tayo dito. Kasi yung kaibigan ko naglagay doon eh. No, sir. Lahat ho yan may purpose. Lahat lalagyan ng bawat elemento, acoustic element, may purpose ho yan. Whether it be by the side or by the ceiling. You have to understand that sound travels in a spherical manner, pabilog. So, tumatama sa floor, tumatama sa walls, tumatama sa taas. Lahat yan. May reflection, may absorption, and everything else. Okay. Now, every room has its problems and sonic characteristics. Magkakaiba po yan. Okay? And there are limitations and constraints. For example, there are rooms that are very long, very narrow. May mga rooms naman na long, very wide, pero ang baba ng ceiling. So all these things are constraints that you have to consider in designing. And of course, the other thing is that a total understanding of the science, physics, math, and the characteristics of the various elements of sound and its behavior is paramount. So walang hula-hula po. Para kayong doktor kasi, for example, they'll probably call on you, a client will call on you and will say, Mike, pwede mo bang tignan itong kwarto namin kasi nagkakaroon ng boomy sound eh. You say, so you are in there to cure. So parang doktor, going to a doctor for some ailment or imbalance, questions what is wrong, no? Test to determine what it really is wrong. Prescription, you test, observe some more, make adjustments until ailment is cured. Hindi yung pagdating sa'yo ng pasyente, 2 aspirin lang yan, okay na. You don't. You have to do some tests. MRI, ultrasound, etc., etc. Dapat makita mo yung tests. The same thing with analyzing a room. It's not just a matter of, kasi merong 1 meter by 1 meter na reflector dyan sa taas eh. 1 meter by 1 meter actually is nothing in a big room. Yung pop, lulusutan lang ng sound yan. High frequency probably, you know. It affects high frequencies. But when it comes to low frequency, mid lang, wala na eh. Lampasan na yan eh. Diba? Okay. Okay. So, sabi ni Norman Varney, an acoustician, sabi niya there are 6 steps in acoustic design. So, ngayon ang pinag-uusapan natin is the first one, which is acoustics of the space. Ang acoustics of the space also includes dimensions. Very important. Dimensions, shape is also very important. Okay? Ang sabi niya, there are 6 things that has to be done. First is that you have to understand the problem. And then you have to understand the goals, limitations, and constraints. So puro question yan. You have to talk with client, you have to talk with the users, you have to talk with everybody else. Ano ba nagiging problema? Okay? So once you have all those things noted down, the next thing is that you test the existing conditions. You have to look at the acoustics characteristic of the room. For example, anong noise floor, anong NC, anong noise criteria. Susukatin mo yan. Ambient level ng kwarto, mayroon bang pumapasok na sound, mayroon bang lumalabas na sound, all these things you have to consider. Number 3, you have to look at the room modes. That's very important. Room modes are actually affected by the dimensions of the room. The bigger the room, the lower the room modes. Ang nangyayari, no? But it depends really on the spacing. So in our case, I'm an acoustician. What we do is that we compute based on the different modes. And hahanapin namin kung ano yung nag-overlap, ano yung nagre-resonate sa kwarto, and everything else. So we understand. And then you have also to look into the first order reflections. Ang pumapasok pag naglagay ka ng loudspeakers, saan unang balandra ng sound. And then of course, your RT60, which is your reverberation time. You can actually measure that, no? Okay? So the third one is that analysis of the tests to see what has to be addressed. What is standing out, ano ang unbalanced, what is to be controlled, what is to be neutralized, to see how these tests apply to the targets or objectives. So analysis. Susunod, calculations and modeling. Ang gagawin mo, anong kailangan na treatment needed to see how to arrive at the targets. From existing conditions, need what materials to use, how to apply, where to apply, quantities, how much. So, ang dami pong iisipin, ang dami pong kinukompute. No? It's good because nowadays hindi na kami gumagamit ng slide rule. No? Pero inambutan ko po yung nag-i-slide rule kami and one frequency lang calculation namin sa RT60. Nung araw yon. Okay? Now, there are several things that you can actually make use of. May mga software you can use. And then there are some formulas you can use also. Halos actually in reality, pag pinagsama-sama mo yun, halos pare-pareho eh. I use normally 3 formulas in my calculations. Okay. And then prescription. Ano yung gamot? What materials to use and how to apply them. When all those things are put in place already, you test again. And then you tweak. Follow-up test to see if there are additional design additions to be made, and then rectifications. Okay. Now we understand that design work for acoustics and for sound reinforcement and anything about audio and sound is no guesswork. Kailangan ang importante knowledge. Kailangan importante learning. Kailangan importante being abreast with the times. Like for example, we attended a conference in Bangkok sa VIXA, and we were presented with 3 different immersive models. Each one may kanya-kanyang characteristic. And we listened to each one of them. Parang it's so hard to tell the difference. Yung mga ganon, and it's part and parcel of the development. Now, immersive mixing is part of it. AI is here with us. So, total, panibagong thinking ang gagawin natin. Okay? So, in acoustics, architectural acoustics, incidentally, architectural acoustics is just one of the branches of acoustics. Ang acoustics po is interdisciplinary. Marami yan eh. Mayroong sonar acoustics, mayroong physical acoustics, sound reinforcement, architectural acoustics. Yung gumagawa ng building at saka mag-acoustic ng mga kwarto and everything else is architectural acoustics. There's also engineering acoustics. Magkakaiba yan. Yung sa sonar, yung sa mayroon pang oceanography, which is partly acoustics also. Ultrasound is acoustics. MRI is acoustics. Sound yun eh. Yung finifeed sa iyo sa loob, yung ginaganon, that's microphone and a receiver. That's a transducer po yun. Transducer means it is a combination of something that receives and transmits. Transducer. Okay? So, nag-i-emit yon ng sound, pagkatapos at the same time, yung reflection nung tinatamaan sa yung bata, i-receive niya, lalabas ngayon yung image. That's ultrasound for you. That is acoustics. So, architectural acoustics normally, aside from the two, there are some others, no, that concerns it. But the main two things about architectural acoustics are soundproofing and acoustic conditioning. Magkaiba po yung dalawang yun. Okay? Ang soundproofing or sound insulation is quietness required, or sound mitigation, or sound insulation, or isolation. Ang ano yan is that how quiet, like for example, yung boom, 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 ganyan, no? Dapat yan sa kwarto, if it cannot be removed, it should be minimized. Dapat hindi siya nag-aapekto sa loob. So again, these are things that have to be considered. Of course, the more soundproofing you use, the more expensive it gets. Okay? And then, aircon, machinery noise. For example, yung mga, see, the ambient noise here is very high. Siguro mga 75 dB total, ano nito, about 80 dB pa siguro. Yung ganun. Ang normal kasi about 45 to about 50. Quiet room yun. Okay? So, aircon and machinery room noise is also should be considered. And then, inside and outside noise, yung break-ins and breakouts. Kasi, like for example, if you have a recording studio and it's not soundproofed, ilalabas yung tunog mo, pwede kang you will probably interrupt or for that matter, you'll get complaints from the neighborhood. Kasi maingay ka especially mga nagbabanda, palakasan kasi yan yung gano'n, no? And then noise in also, no? Noise coming in. Kasi ayaw mong lumabas yung kahul ng aso, ayaw mong lumabas. You're right in the middle of a very nice recording. Let's say, very nice ballad. Ang ganda-ganda ng pagkanta ng singer and everything, biglang kakahul yung aso. You know? Pag you have something like that, ilagyan mo na lang ng effects din. Ilagay mo doon sa part of the song yung kahul ng aso. Or something like that, no, if you can't really provide it. Because the thing is, performance is very important. That's the reason for soundproofing. Kasi once you take a performance that is perfect, it's going to be so hard to replicate that. It happened a lot of times. I've experienced it myself. A lot of people probably, a lot of you guys actually have experienced the same thing. Yung mga ganda-ganda ng take, pagkatapos biglang, oh no, ulitin nga natin yung ganito, no? Well, nowadays, there's nung araw, analog pa kami, there's such a thing as punch in, punch out. It's basically the same thing that's what's happening also now. But the thing is, sometimes yung quality nung initial recording at saka yung punch in, no, hindi the same. So hahabulin niyo yun. So take ka na, maya paus na yung singer mo. So break, let's go home, let's continue tomorrow. Ganun yun Okay? All right. So that is soundproofing. In other words, making the place totally soundproofed or totally quiet. So ang machinery dapat you can feel the coldness. You do not hear it. Pag gumanong ka sa diffuser ng air conditioning, there is no air. You don't feel the air, but you feel the cold. Can it be done? Yes. We've done it several times. In most of the broadcast studios, we've done some recording studios. We finished a recording studio lately. Well, it's a TV taping podcast, whatever it is you call it, no? Sa CCF. And it's so quiet that, you won't believe na you're in a room that's totally isolated. Well, there are techniques that has to be used in doing that. Okay, so tapos na tayo sa soundproofing. So yung soundproofing po, hindi ka lang gagamit ng 12 mm or 9 mm na polyester fiber and that's soundproofing. No, sir. Yung pong 9 mm o 12 mm na polyester fiber does not soundproof. Lumulusot ang sound dun. Hindi ginagamit yun sa soundproofing. Ginagamit yun sa acoustic conditioning or sound quality control. Yung glass fiber, for example, no, na let's say 50 mm, it is a soundproofing material. You use it together with some other elements. But by itself, hindi ho siya pang soundproof. Lumulusot din ang sound doon. Ginagamit yon inside the walls primarily because you want to remove the resonance inside the wall. But what you need is what they call mass spring mass. Ano ibig sabihin nun? Mass means solid, CHB, or sandwich made of different layers of gypsum board. Pagkatapos spring, what is spring? Spring is air. And then mass again. Now, of course, there are some things that you have to consider, like, for example, sympathetic resonance and all those other things. Marami pong things to consider. All right, so we go into acoustic conditioning or sound quality control. Now, shape and dimensions play an important role because, like what I was telling you before, yung, especially yung calculation ng ng modes actually depends on your measurements, kung ano yung laki. Kaya kami, ang ginagawa namin, we use the golden ratios, no? Which is actually published all over. And these are actually published by, researched by physicists, by scientists. Although pag kinumpute mo, sometimes parang alangan. So it's up to you to adjust. It's basically things like, all of these things naman are guides. For example, you use a software, sinukat mo yung lugar. Okay, so lumabas yung curve mo and everything else. The question is, how do you interpret that curve? How do you interpret yung result? If you don't interpret it, and you don't know how to interpret it, sorry, it's useless. Maski na napakamahal ng iyong software. Let's say you're using Smart or one of those guys, you know, it'll be useless. Kasi hindi mo naman ma-interpret it. You don't know how to use it. So the same thing, no? Same thing. Okay, so shape and dimensions play an important role. The height, the width, and the length. Ang calculation niyan, let's say ang shape mo is, for example, hexagonal or something like that. There's a way of calculating all those things. And you can actually find that through internet. And you have to be very careful about the internet. Kasi yung internet po, kalahati ron mali. Kalahati tama. So you have to be very careful with what you are following. Okay. So, ayan, ito pala. Understand difference between soundproofing and room acoustic conditioning. Would you need either or both? So again, ito yung pinag-usapan natin kanina. Yung, ang mga things to consider here is that, yun nga, mass, spring mass, and then room within a room concept. You have to know your STC or the sound transmission class. You have to understand all these things. So hindi lang po lalagay tayo ng hollow blocks, okay na. Hindi po ganon. You have to understand the STC requirement or the transmission loss or the value of CHB. Pag nakapad ba, pag mayroong plaster ba, anong value nun? So all these things have to be considered as part of your calculation. And then, what's your noise criteria? What is your noise rating? All of these things actually come into play. So mass is what is needed in soundproofing or sound insulation. For example, if you have a bomb shelter, that's a very good recording studio. There are a couple of recording studios in Boston, in Massachusetts, actually, nasa loob, nasa ilalim ng bomb shelter sila eh. Nung kapanahon ni Kennedy kasi natatakot sila na nuklarin sila eh. Diba? So ang ginawa nila, gumawa sila ng mga bomb shelters. And wala nang use yun, so ginawa nilang recording studio. Diba? Perfect. Diba? If I'm not mistaken, it's Beersville, I think, yung recording studio. I don't know if it's still in existence. Okay, so transmission class, ito mga mga elements that you have to more or less, you have to introduce to you para you'll be exposed, no? STC, it's a measure of sound blocking ability of a material. Parang ganito ho, and then that's the STC curve. Ito yung STC curve. Pag measure kasi ng STC is not a direct, let's say, measurement and that's it. You have to use the STC measure. Yung ganon, no? All right? So high STC ratings help reduce noise transmission and create a focused environment, residential, commercial, and educational spaces. Kasi you want something which is quiet. All right. Now, pagdating sa acoustics of the space, which is sound quality and everything else, there are three elements that we normally use, no? Which is reflection, absorption, and diffusion. reflection is angle of incidence is equal to angle of reflection. No? Kung ano yung papasok na doon, yun yung talbog niya. Pag kasi reflected surface. No? Yung ano naman, yung absorption naman is that you have an absorptive material, papasok yung sound into the absorptive material. Like for example, palagay natin 100 dB na pumasok dun sa, let's say, 100 mm na glass fiber, and ang lumabas is 60 dB. Kasi whether you like it or not, meron pa ring reflection eh. So you have actually a 60 dB reflection, or the ability of the material to absorb sound is only 40 dB. Again, all these dBs, if you really want to go into it, you have to understand what it is. Because you cannot appreciate if you don't understand what it is. Okay. Diffusion naman, ikinakalat niya. Ang difference between absorption and diffusion, ang diffusion kasi, hanggang anong oras tayo? 11:30 o 11? 11:30? Okay. Nasayang kasi yung in 30 minutes. But anyway, absorption and diffusion. Ang absorption kasi, it absorbs the energy, it breaks the energy into molecules, so you destroy the sound wave, the sound energy. Yung diffusion, it scatters the sound all over the place. So ang mangyayari is that you do not destroy, but you just redirect everything. You divide, let's say, one particular energy into several energies. If you look at what happens here in this particular area. Okay? Medyo bibilisan natin, no? So, sa room acoustic conditioning, what is important is that tempering of the total response of the room by accepted mathematical formulas, charts, graphs, and specifications. For example, AES-TM, ISO, AES, ASA, IEC, Dolby, etc. These are all specifications that are given by this organization. AES-TM is the American Society of American Society of forgot. Anyway. Okay. All right. So, ang importante dito is that you calculate the RT60 and you have this curve. All right? So, you have this red curve, which is actually more bass-oriented. And then you have a curve, which is actually blue, which is more high-frequency-oriented. Pagsasamahin mo yung dalawang yun so that you can come up with that green curve. Okay? So, it takes a lot of calculations. Maraming pencil pushing yan. And napakaraming trial and error. Kasi in reality, ang acoustics, para kang naglalaro eh. Until you get the perfect curve. Of course, using the formulas. Okay. And then the other thing is you assign the placements of the acoustic elements in areas where they will perform best and efficient. Hindi yung itatapal mo lang sa lugar o ilalagay mo sa flooring, hindi naman tumatama yung sound. Siguro certain amount of energy, But mas maganda siguro kung if i-face mo yung acoustic element towards the source of sound. Parang ganon, So all those things have to be considered. That's the reason why it is important that you understand where the reflections are going and coming from. All right? And now, the other thing also is that you have to consider aesthetics. But one thing about acoustics is that it has to be function first before form. Ito ang etong ayaw ng mga arkitekto eh. But when I start explaining things to them, and then naliwanagan, so they'll say, ganun pala, okay. Sa College of Architecture, 3 units lang yata yung acoustics eh. Hindi tinuturo ng tama, saka ng mahaba. Anyway. Okay, so these are the response curves that I was talking about. Ito, AES. Ito is Dolby Atmos. You follow those curves. And then, tignan nyo yung may rise and decay sa 200 Hertz, up. Yan ang reference. The reason why they came up with this one is primarily because they tested several people. And it came out that this would be the perfect curve, listenability, okay? Intelligibility, neutral, natural, it sounds good. So the organizations actually came out with this particular curve. All right. So, well-planned based on the requirements of the space, there is actually no such thing as multi-purpose. Hindi ho nangyayari yun. You can do variable acoustics, pero everything will now become parang nag-aano ka. Of course, you can do it, but then it's not what it is supposed to be. Okay? Now, so what is important is that you divide usage as per needs of the owner. For example, sabihin ng owner, hindi kasi gagamitin kong home theater. At the same time, nagpa-practice yung banda ko rito, tapos maglalaro yung mga bata. So you divide accordingly. You look into all these things and then you design according to the needs of the client. Each space has its own sound. Like, for example, concert hall, Christian church, an auditorium, convention hall, conference room, Catholic church. Ang Catholic church at saka ang Christian church, magkaiba ang tunog. Magkaiba yan. Okay? All right? And then, employ professional designers to design the needs of the room. Even before an architect is hired, sorry, mga arkitekto rito. My daughter, who's under my employee now, is a registered architect. And we always come out with debates and everything else, but I have to explain things to her. Okay? But when she actually understands how things are, and then she says, ganun pala, Dad. Okay. All right. So even before an architect is hired, get an acoustician or somebody who understands the purpose. Like, for example, a church. Like, for example, dapat anong gagamiting sound reinforcement system, etc., etc. Okay. Requirements are different, especially sonically. Well-planned based on the requirements of the space. Employ competent audio, lights, and effects experts to design the needs, aircon and ventilation requirements, comfort, controlled noise levels. These are just some of the tools that you can actually make use of in measuring your room. Ito pa, no? Technology area, saan ba ilalagay loading base, ang dami. Kunan na lang ninyo ng picture para kasi dalawa pa yung pag-uusapan natin. Okay. Proper use of the acoustic materials. There are a lot of failed projects. I've seen a lot of those. As a matter of fact, we're doing one right now that we've been designing for the past almost 2 years. And we can't seem to have the right solution for it. The reason behind that is because there are a lot of constraints. No? Yung lugar na yung ginagamit on a weekly basis. So, paano ka gagawa? Pay attention to detail during the construction. This is CCF in Alabang, which we designed several years ago. Yung mga tiga CCF Alabang dito, if you remember this church, the architect here is Art Leasing. I did all the acoustical requirements. Okay. Ang loudspeakers to nakatago andun sa taas. Wala kayong makikitang speakers sa labas. Pero ngayon yata nagsabit na sila. All right. You look into the future. What are your expansion needs? Additional sound reinforcement, lights, etc., etc. Dapat mayroon kayong lugar para dyan para hindi kayo nagbabakbak. All right, this is UECP in Santa Cruz, Manila. It's an old church that we remodeled. We have a lot of constraints here, but so far, yung mga nakapag-mix na doon, every time I see them, sir, ang ganda-ganda ng tunog. Okay. Meyer yan, yung speakers na yan. Yan lang ang speaker. Subwoofer sa likod, 6 per side na line array. Yan lang ang speaker. Okay? Basta tama ang lugar, tama ang tunog. Okay, now, sound reinforcement system. Okay, well designed and thought of based on the needs and requirements. Steps, find out the purpose and the usage, involve in the operation, people concerned, pastors, technical people, and of course, the budget. Importante yung budget. No? Kasi kung hindi nila naman lang kaya, tapos ang dinesign mo napakamahal na $375,000, no? Na dalawang speaker lang yun. Hindi kakayanin. Okay? Studied and researched system must be enough to serve the present and future needs of the entire acoustic space. And then the control system is, the control area is very important also as well. You have to look into the choice of microphones, into number of inputs for the consoles, for the mixers, etc., etc.
Okay. And then you can actually make use of all these things, you know. Ang importante kasi is that your loudspeakers, your design should be modeled. Nowadays, you can actually do that. It has to be modeled using ease or using some of the brands. May kanya-kanyang modeling software lahat naman sila. You have to find out saan ba malakas, dito ba 100 dB, dito, and so forth and so on. Paanong spread ng sound. Okay, so all these things have to be considered. Modeling actually will make life easier for you guys. Okay? Anong amplification, no? The coverage in every nook and cranny of the space. Well designed and thought of, position of the control, line of sight, ease of movement from the control center to the stage. Kasi minsan yung technician mo, tatakbo papuntang stage. Alam nga na maakit, kunwari, nandun siya sa second floor, baba siya gano'n, layo-layo. Yung gano'n, mag-aayos ng mikrofono. Minsan kasi isang tao lang gumagawa lahat yan. So all those things you have to consider as part of the design process. No? Ergonomic setup. Ideally, the control area should be positioned on the 30th part of the room. 30. You divide the room into 3 parts. And yung stage, second part is vacant, third part, dun dapat yung control. Pag nanood kayo ng sine, the same thing. You divide the hall into 3 parts. Yung third row, dun kayo umupo. Why? Kasi normally, yung theater mix room, dun nakaposisyon yung engineer. So you can listen to each and every nuance that he has actually heard. Mark my word for it. They call it 38%, but in reality, it's only about 33. Okay? All controls of the house lights, effects, etc. must be centralized. It must be centralized within the control area. Kasi, like for example, there is one situation, one church, wherein the switches are actually all over the place. Sabi ng pastor, let's have the house lights off. Isa-isang namamatay. See, if everything, house lights and everything else is in one place, pok, tapos. Diba? So all those things have to be considered in the design. Okay. Looking for first reflections. This is a recording studio situation. Reflections normally is towards where the loudspeaker is, and then reflecting towards the wall, going towards the mixed position. Okay. There are vertical reflections also, which is basically the same thing. Area of reflection is equal to area of incidence. Position your mixed position on the 38th again in a recording studio situation. That's the first third. Second third somewhere here. The third third is at the back. Now, you can actually place that also towards the second third if you want. But kaya lang, ang loudspeaker mo ngayon, you have to have not only a near field, but you have to have a far field or a mid field, they call it. So again, it really depends on the situation. All right. Service and maintenance is the other thing that you have to consider when talking about sound reinforcement systems and equipment. You have to talk about availability of parts, service and immediate replacement by supplier, easy access. The other thing that is very important is that you get what you pay for. Pag kunwari, bibili ka lang sa raon and everything else, of course, you'll have a lot of problems. So if you are going to invest in a sound system that you want to last for the next 15, 20, 25 years, yung nasa Union Church of Manila, ginawa ko yun noong 1991 yata. Until now, gumagana yung turbo sound doon. Pero pinalitan na nila. Pero nandun pa rin. But what I'm just trying to say is that from that time until now, it's still in existence and it works perfectly. So it's an investment, mind you. And you have to look into the pricing and you have to look into future expansion. Ito, this is this is ano pala eh. Yeah, this is at Union Church of Manila. The architect of this one is our national artist for architecture, si Bobby Manyosa. No? Yung loudspeaker doon, nakasabit, RCF yan, yun ang ipinalit nila. Yung loudspeakers andun sa taas, kung saan nakatago yung turbo sound. Okay? All right, now, this one I really love. Okay. First, you have to select knowledgeable personnel or somebody who has interest, genuine interest in what he's doing. Hindi yung hindi kasi gwapo ako pag nagmi-mix ako, gwapo ako pag nagsa-sound system. Hindi po ganoon. Dapat may heart, especially the ones in the churches, dapat you have to really have the heart, to serve. Hindi yung, hindi, kasi gwapo ako pag maganda yung tunog. That's nothing. Okay? You really have to have the genuine feel for what you're doing. Not only in terms of, like, for example, sa church, but also in the job. Okay? Dapat mabilis kayo magtrabaho, you can solve things right away, analytical yung mind. So, ayan, do not get people without any idea at all about sound. Dapat somebody who really understands already na ang sound pala ganito, okay, nag-aaral, hindi lang tinitignan ng internet. Kasi like I said, there are a lot of things that can mislead you when it comes to internet. What is important is that you go back into the books. It's funny because I was looking at some of my old books. Alam yung mga lumalabas ngayon pinag-uusapan sa internet, they had it in their books 100 years ago. That's what I'm trying to say. In other words, nababago lang ng konti, pero it's the same basic, the foundational requirements. So the same thing, okay? Personnel with even just a bit of music or operational experience would be ideal to qualify. Ako personally, sa bagay, ano lang naman I only had 4 engineers, mixing engineers. 2 of them are already in the States. One is working for a medical company as an electronic engineer. The other one, nandito pa sa Pilipinas, si Angie Rusul. I don't know if you've heard the name Angie Rusul. Napakinggan nyo na ba yung pangalang Angie Rusul? Hindi nyo kilala si Angie? Okay. Pag nagkita kami ni Angie, sabihin ko sa kanya, Angie, hindi ka pala kilala Angie mixed all the albums of, yung mga recorded sa studio ko, sa Track Studios, Eraserheads. Siya ang nag-record kay Cynthia Alexander. Siya ang nag-record kay Bamboo. Siya ang nag-record ng Mayonnaise. Siya ang nag-record kay Freddie Aguilar. Siya ang nag-record, you name it. Award-winning guy po yun. He started when he was still a pretty young guy. But he was an electronics guy. And we had to train him. And he became one of the best, you might say, engineering guys, audio engineering guys in the Philippines. Okay, now, train personnel properly by knowledgeable trainers with proper technical and operational background, plus experience. Marami hong nagtitrain, marami hong nagtitrain na ang source ng kanilang knowledge kung ano lang napapanood sa YouTube. Hindi ho ganun. Dapat na-i-explain mo bakit ganun. Bakit pag pinagsama mo yung kunwari itong let's say situation na ito plus yung situation na ito, nangyayari ito. If you are going to get into training and if you want to employ somebody to train you, make sure that the guy who's going to be training you can explain to you exactly in terms of scientific evidence the explanation behind. Hindi kasi ganun Hindi po ganun. Okay? Dapat merong explanation. See, I always tell my people, my trainees, my announcers, as a matter of fact, because I'm a radio guy, I'm a broadcast guy. Yun ang umpisa ko broadcast. And I've trained several radio announcers, newscasters, and everybody else. Yung nag-voice ng ABS-CBN, si Peter Musik, was one of my announcers before. Nag-voice ng GMA7, si Al Torres was one of my guys. And si Jeremiah Jr., all those guys, But anyway, what I always tell these guys is that the guy who knows how to do it, knows how to do it. But the guy who knows why you should do it is boss. You get it? The guy who knows how to do it and understands why it should be done that way and explains why it should be done that way is boss. Pag hindi mo explain, nambobola itong taong to. Diba? Okay. Avoid hearsay trainers, no foundational or formal training. When I say formal training, it's important that they have total background, at least seminars, at least attending technical workshops, at least 2 years of vocational course or something like that. Dapat naiintindihan yung electronics. Kasi itong trabaho natin is not only technical eh. It's creative. It's a combination of creativity and technical. Kung puro ka technical, wala mangyayari sa'yo. Kung puro ka namang artistry, paano mo gagawin? You have to blend the two so that you can achieve whatever things you have in your head. Like, I was watching how they dissected yung every breath you take ng police. I don't know if you've seen that. Nakita niyo yung kick drum, paano nila ginawa? Paano nilagay yung gitara? Paano nilagay yung... Fantastic. See, that's creativity and understanding the machine that they were using. You have to understand that that record was recorded analog, 24 tracks, probably 48 tracks, nakasync with each other. But what I'm just trying to say is that they do not have the unlimited tracks that we have now. Na pwede kang 1,000 tracks or whatever. Maximum siguro, like Michael Jackson used 3 24-track machines. So that's, ilan yun? 72 tracks total. But did he use everything? Actually, the funny thing about it, there's one song that he recorded and they did a lot of layers and everything else and overdubs and everything. Tapos they all went back to cut 1. Kasi yun ang yun yung initial eh. That's where the salvo goes eh. The artisticity is there eh. Nandun yung gana eh. No? Okay. So, strong foundation, basics, and good character. Willing to listen and learn. That's the most important thing. I listen. I have 1967, I have more than 50 years experience in audio. No? And I still listen. Pag may sinabi sa akin ng bata, makes sense. I'll adopt it. You have to go on learning. Learning is an ongoing thing. It should never stop. Once you stop learning, patay ka na. Once you stop learning, kawawa ka naman. You have to go on learning. Buy books. Hindi naman sa pagyayabang, but I think I have the biggest library of audiobooks in the Philippines. I have double copies of several books. Whenever I travel, for example, if I go to Bangkok or I go to Singapore, first thing I go to is Kinokuniya. Bakit? I'll spend the whole day there and look at the books, architectural books, technical books. Uuwi ako. Sasabihin na miss ko, bumili ka na naman ng libro. Sasabihin ko, hindi, that's for our kids. Anyway, strong foundation, basics, good character is very important. You have to be willing to listen and learn. Like, take the case of the tonmeisters of Europe. What are tonmeisters? Ton is sound. Meister is master. These guys, these are sound engineers in Europe. Nagbabasa yan ng piyesa pag nagmi-mix. Mga PhD holders lahat yan. Well, karamihan sa kanila. Pag sinabing tonmeister ka, that means you're a master, you're a sound master. PhD po sa mga ganyan. Okay? So that's what we have to achieve. We want to become tonmeisters, not regular audio guy. Okay? All right. Conservatory graduates, doctoral degrees. Operating a mixer, sabi nga ng isang operating a mixer can be learned in 2 hours, but the musical sensibility is achieved or learned in years. What is musical sensibility? Yan ang importante sa lahat pag nagmi-mix ka. Musical sensibility, which means you should know, you have to have an ear for music. You have to have a mastery of the frequency components of instruments, for example, where the mid-frequency instrument should be so as not to clash with the voice, for example. And then you have to understand and have a good sense of balance. Ang dami-dami akong naririnig na, like, in my own church, for example, I just go out of the church when I listen to the mixes. Because minsan, napakalakas ng drums, napakalakas ng piano, pagdating may choir, lubog yung choir. Mga ganun, no? I mean, it can be corrected. But the important thing is that people should have the musical sensibility. Madali magpipihit eh. Tama ba yung pinipihit nyo in the first place? Tama ba yung frequency? Di ba? For example, mayroong... Alright. Proper knowledge or idea how speech sounds, for example. What's wrong with my voice? There's too much 200 hertz, 300 hertz. You know why? I call those the sleepy frequencies. 285 hertz is the curing frequency. Pag nakinig ka ng 285 hertz, gumagaling daw yung katawan mo. Nare-relax ka, natutulog ka. Sa speech ng tao, pag nakaangat yan, habang nagsasalita yung pastor, tulog lahat ng tao. 285 hertz. So that's 300 hertz down until about 200 hertz. Totoo yun. Okay. This is CCF Cebu, which we designed also. Okay, in conclusion, ayan, para meron tayong question and answer. In conclusion, think of all the wants, the needs, the requirements. Look into the budget, affordability. In other words, kaya ba ng ating simbahan? Kaya ba ng ating kung sino papatayo? I mean, like, for example, yung UECP, nung ginawa namin yon, yung aming sponsor, sabi niya nga, Mike, iharap mo nga sa akin yung mga magagandang speaker. Sabi ko, okay, boss, ganito yan. Yung una, Meyer, yung isa, Acoustics, ito ho is Nexo, ito ho is, there's another one, DNB. Okay, so, hinarap namin ganun. Nakinig siya. Kasi he's musically oriented eh. He's knowledgeable. And this guy is the main sponsor. He spent for the entire church. Lahat yung malalaking LED screen, lahat yung Meyer speakers and everything else. Sabi niya nga, anong speaker yan, Mike? Sabi ko, Meyer ho. Gusto ko yan. Okay. Sure. You know, I don't know how much a Meyer costs. No? But, you know, he liked it. Yun ang kinabit namin. Does it work? It did work. You get what you pay for. If you are going to invest in a sound system, you have to make sure that it is good quality, it has a good brand. Kasi brand also makes sense. Okay? So these things have to be considered. All right. You research, design, the usage, trend spotting. What's that? Ano yung magiging future trend? Ano magiging, like for example, ano ba nangyayari? Ngayon, iba-ibang line array types. Iba-ibang, ang dami nang lumalabas eh. Ngayon, may mga columnar line arrays, may mga, see, all these things. Kailangan ba natin ng ganun? Kung, let's say, kakailanganin natin, saan natin kakabit? So these things you have to consider. Trend spotting, testing, go on tests to determine initial functions and performance. Attention to detail. And then, this is very important in the construction and implementation phase. So, and then final determinations on performance of the room, you tweak, and then you commission. Okay? So those are things that you have to consider. So 3, the Trinity, we call them. Trinity primarily because it means you cannot go against, or one cannot be without the other. Okay? Parang sa Sesame Street. Parang ganun, di ba? So, you have to make sure that all 3 elements, the acoustics of the space, tama yung lugar, tama yung shape, tama lahat, Yung sound reinforcement system, you get what you pay for, well-designed, hindi over-designed. I've seen a lot of facilities that are over-designed. And then, of course, the third one is that operator proficiency. Okay? There. Now, questions. Yes. May mikropono ba tayo? Alin? Yung? Ito? No. No. The reason behind that is that way back in when AES Philippine section was established in 1991. Pero nag-full swing kami 1993 and we started doing a lot of lectures already. We used to give away CD copies of our lectures. Sorry, pinapirate eh. And inaangkin. Siyempre, lahat kami nagre-research. Lahat kami pinag-aaralan namin yun. Pagkatapos makikita namin yung trabaho namin, ginagamit. Sasabihin ng taong gumamit ng opya, trabaho ko yan eh. So we don't anymore. Okay, we give outlines, but not the physical copies. Okay, any other question? Any? So everybody satisfied?
Hello.
Yeah.
Sir, good morning.
Good morning, sir.
We are from Dumaguete, sir.
Mhm.
Sir, this is not a question, but in reality, sir, kung minsan papasok tayo sa sound industry, especially installation, mostly ipakita na sa customers natin yung area na fix. Di ba? So doon na lang tayo magawa ng assessment kung anong system o anong klaseng sound system ilagay natin doon. But sinasabi mo doon na good area, good, especially sometimes kung maka-meet ka ng good area, okay, but in other way, there's a time that the area, kahit ano gawin mo, kahit i-acoustic mo, minsan ayaw pa rin. So yun yung problema sometimes, sir, di ba? Okay sana kung tayo yung nag-design, tayo nagpatayo, tayo ang nag-ano sa area, tamang-tama. Pero mostly, kadalasan ma-attend natin na fix na talaga yung pinapasok natin.
Okay.
Diba, sir?
Okay. Now, the way to do it, kung ganun ang sitwasyon, na you have to just install a sound system, for example, sound reinforcement system. You can't do anything anymore regarding the space, right? Kasi nagawa na eh. You have to explain that to client. The why. That's what I'm saying. Wala ka na magawa eh. Ngayon, pwede mong sabihin, pero alam niyo boss, mas maganda kung ayusin natin ang acoustics ng space. Because you have to remember that any place that is acoustically treated, na well-treated, well-balanced and everything else, any loudspeaker you put sounds good. Of course, nag-excel yung mga branded, no? Pero in terms of intelligibility, in other words, pwede na. Tamang spasyo eh. In the first place kasi, yung acoustics of a space is supposed to enhance already the sound even without amplification. You have to understand na ang tawag sa amplification is sound reinforcement. Ano ibig sabihin nun? You aid sound. Hindi ang tawag is room reinforcement. O hindi tawag audio reinforcement. Sound. Yung nadidinig natin, which is sound, is being reinforced by the system para marinig, umabot hanggang dun sa likod. Yun ang ibig sabihin nun. So, you have to explain to client, bakit? You have to explain how things are. And ito ang assessment namin, ito sana ang proposal namin. Ngayon, pag sinabi niya, wala tayong pera eh. And then you have to explain, well, the way to do it is this. If you want, you can probably start with this, and then we finish off with this. I've done a lot of churches, big churches, or big membership churches, no, na parte-parte. But the plan is already finished. So sasabihin ko sa mga elders, uunahin natin itong lugar na ito. Itong ikakabit natin. Okay. And then after that, pag may pera uli sila, oh Mike, may pera na kami, may budget na kami, may nag-donate sa amin ng mga 30 million. Oh, yung ganda, di ba? Oh, then, you start doing things again hanggang mabuo. So, these things can be done. Again, it's technical and creativity. It's not just, kailangan natin dyan kasi meron dapat tayong front fill, meron tayong line array na 64 per side na gumaganon, di ba? All the way dun sa likod, ganon. 64 per side, yung tipong ganon. Tapos bass bins na 100 sa harap kasi kailangan natin yung bayo eh. Yung ganon. I mean, for somebody who does not really understand how things are, you probably say, yeah, ang ganda. But you are the knowledgeable person. It's not sales per se. Yung ating trabaho kasi is not just making money. It's passion. Ako, why I've been in this industry, you know, primarily because I'm passionate about how sound is. I'm passionate about acoustics. Yung ganon, no? So, it's really up to you to explain how things are. There is always a solution to every problem. So, you have to make use of your creativity and your technical knowledge to come out with a solution. Ano nakalagay? Ilang minutes? 5 minutes? O sige, last question na siguro. Any other question? Yes.
Morning, sir.
Yeah.
Sir Mike.
Uh-huh.
I'm from Davao, a newbie in this kind of industry. Most of the topics that were actually discussed was basically on an indoor space. What are the challenges kung outdoor yung venue? Like an outdoor bar, operate an outdoor bar, and daming hindi namin maintindihan na sounds.
Yes.
Is it totally dependent on the sound system? As you were saying, kung maganda yung sound treatment ng area, kahit hindi masyado maganda na speakers, can actually sound nice. But how about on an outdoor setup?
Okay. That's the reason why yung title ng aking lecture or talk is about getting whatever in a space. It's not room. Open area kasi, an open space is a perfect acoustical space. Walang reflection eh, especially kung wala reflection. But then, if you are within the city, for example, then you would have a problem. Because the problem there is that bubulabugin mo yung mga kapitbahay. There are a lot of cases like that, no? Especially on the lower frequencies. Now, the solution to it, again, technical, you can actually do mga cardioid bass bins or whatever, all these techniques that can be used. I was made to understand that in several, there are actually right now, I'm not sure, I think some other manufacturers also would have it, but so far there are only two I know that actually can employ this particular thing. They can stop sound by 30 dB at a certain distance. Fantastic. I couldn't believe it at first. Nung una natatawa ako eh. Sabi ko talaga, paano mo stop sound? Ang sistema is steerable acoustics, steerable array ang ginagamit. They can stop the sound. 100 dB biglang 30 dB down. They've done it in Glasgow, they've done it in Hong Kong, they've done it in... Fantastic. So again, these are what's happening in the future. Advancement in technology, which we as people have to understand as people in the sound industry. So again, in a situation like that, keep your volume down, low. Employ some things like you can probably use, steerable loudspeakers or whatever, para you can border, no? So there are some things, but it costs. Wag naman yung iba kasi, ang nangyayari is that they think that loudness is it. Hindi ganun eh. Loud is proud. but it's not pleasant. Pleasantness is what you want in a sound reinforcement system. Dapat listenable, maganda ang tunog, klaro. Ang speech dapat should sound like the human voice. Walang at itong SS masyado. Walang masyadong low frequency. Kasi hindi naman ganun. The human voice, ang lalaki, pagdating sa 150 Hz, bagsak. Maski na yung mga baritone, bagsak 150. Babae, 250. You can measure it. So why do you have to understand how it sounds? Understand the frequencies. Ano ang 150 Hz? Anong tunog ng 250 Hz? Anong tunog ng 300 Hz? Ano yung mga particular elements that are very important when it comes to all these frequencies? Yung sibilance masyado. So, gagamit ka ng some other things or you can use your equalization. So, tenga is very important. Ngayon, pag nagpapatugtog ka palagi ng maingay, palagi ka naka-headset o naka-in-ear, wala ka nang, you can't hear it. Wala na. Ako, I refuse to, in-ear monitor, I refuse to use it. May banda ako mga old fogies. No? And this band can afford. Pag tumugtog kami, pagkatapos binigyan kami ng Jollibee, pinapa-cater namin. Catering, papasukin yung catering para sa banda. But what I'm just trying to say is that take care of your ears. If you're really, if you really are serious with what you're doing right now as a sound guy, as somebody who's involved in sound systems, in design or whatever that involves listening and everything, take care of your ears. Because the best instrument is still, or are still, your ears. So, it can be solved. There's no problem. An open space is the best acoustical space. As long as it's designed well, you won't have any problems. Wala na? No more? Anyway, on Friday, I'm going to talk about what acoustics. Ano yan ito? What acoustics? Question mark. So it's somewhat a repeat of the earlier part, pero more detailed. So if you're interested in acoustics, you can attend. And you might be able to take home something. Ang importante, in attending mga conferences na ganito, it's not really total learning, but you have to take home something. And if you take home something and it helps you out later on in your pursuit for whatever you're doing, your professional career, it's good. And if I'm part of it, well, thank you very much. Okay? Well, thank you very much for attending this morning's session. I hope you have your own takeaways. Mabuhay kayong lahat. God bless you all. Thank you.